The telephone was 14 steps away. I knew because I counted every one of them while I lay on the bathroom floor, staring through the open doorway toward the kitchen. 14 steps. On any other morning, I could have crossed that distance without thinking. But every time I tried to move, a sharp pain shot through my right hip and forced me back onto the wet tile. My phone began ringing on the kitchen counter. I shouted as loudly as I could, even though I knew the person calling couldn't hear me. Then the ringing stopped. I was 67 years old, living alone in the Philippines, more than 8,000 miles from my daughter, and nobody knew I had fallen. That was the moment I became frightened. My name is Diane. 7 months earlier, I left Ohio and moved to Dumaguete. Retirement had given me time, but no real reason to get out of bed. I wasn't miserable. I was simply watching my days pass. Dumaguete seemed manageable, close to the ocean, affordable, and busy without overwhelming me. After months of research and a short visit, I rented a ground-floor apartment. What I loved most was my morning routine. At 8:30, I walked 3 streets to Liza's café. By my second month, she knew my order: coffee, toast, and fruit. If my chair was empty by 9, Liza noticed. I didn't know it yet, but that routine was about to save me. The fall happened on an ordinary Thursday morning. I had just finished showering. My phone was charging on the kitchen counter, 14 steps away. I stepped onto the small rug outside the shower and reached for my towel. The rug moved. My right foot slid forward and I fell sideways before I could catch myself. My hip struck the tile first, then my wrist folded underneath me. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. I tried to sit up, but the pain blurred my vision. My toes moved and I hadn't hit my head, so I wrapped one hand around the sink and pulled. My right leg collapsed. I struck the tile a second time. That was when fear replaced pain. I wasn't getting up on my own. I called for help. The bathroom window was open, but outside I could hear motorcycles, dogs barking, and someone playing music farther down the street. My voice disappeared beneath the normal sounds of the neighborhood. At 8:30, I should have been sitting at Liza's cafe. At 9, I was still on the floor. My phone rang once, then again. This time, I could see the name glowing on the screen from across the room. It was Liza. For the first time that morning, I felt a little hope. She had noticed I wasn't there. But when the ringing stopped, the apartment became quiet again. Nearly 20 minutes passed. Then I heard someone walking outside. 3 loud knocks hit my front door. "Diane?" It was Liza's voice. I tried to answer, but what came out was barely louder than as she called my name again. And this time, she sounded afraid. Liza tried the door, but it was locked. "Diane, can you hear me?" I raised my voice as much as I could. "I fell!" There was a pause. Her footsteps disappeared toward the front of the compound. Liza knew my landlord lived in the house at the front of the compound. Within minutes, she returned with him and his duplicate key. When the door opened, I felt embarrassed before I felt relieved. I was still wearing my bathrobe. My hair was wet, one slipper was near the shower, and the other had landed beside the toilet. It was not how I wanted anyone to see me. Liza knelt beside me. "Don't move," she said. "We're getting help." She held my hand while my landlord called for an ambulance. That small gesture broke something open inside me. Until then, I had been concentrating on the pain and trying not to panic. The moment someone touched my hand, I started crying. The ambulance arrived about 20 minutes later. Every bump in the road sent another jolt through my hip. Liza rode with me, carrying my purse, my phone, and the sandals I had been planning to wear that morning. As we drove, another fear began creeping in. Before moving, I had read frightening stories online about hospitals in the Philippines, long waits, confusing payment requirements, and foreigners who felt completely unprepared. I didn't know which stories represented normal experiences and which were rare worst-case situations. But lying in that ambulance, Alone in a country where I had never needed medical care, I suddenly remembered every one of them. At the hospital, they took x-rays of my hip and wrist. Nothing was broken. I had a badly bruised hip, a sprained wrist, and enough swelling that the doctor wanted to keep me overnight for observation. Physically, I had been lucky, but while a nurse was helping me settle into the room, she asked a simple question. Who should we contact? I gave her my daughter's number. Emily answered on the second call. She lived in Ohio with her husband and 2 teenagers. We spoke once or twice a week, but I edited the details. The markets, the ocean, and the friendly people. Never the outages or the night's unfamiliar sounds made me nervous. I needed both of us to believe I hadn't made a mistake. When Emily heard I was in the hospital, she became silent. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding. How long were you on the floor? A little over an hour. And what if that woman hadn't noticed? I didn't answer. What if you had hit your head? What if you couldn't call out? Mom, nobody there would even know to look for you. Liza looked for me. Because you missed breakfast one time. That isn't an emergency plan. Her words hurt, but only because they were true. Finally, she said what I knew was coming. I want you to come home. I looked across the hospital room at Liza. She had been sitting quietly in the corner for almost 3 hours, holding the bag with my damp clothes inside. I need to think about it. What is there to think about? You're 67 years old, living alone on the other side of the world, and today you couldn't reach your phone. Emily wasn't trying to control me. She was frightened. But as I listened to her, the confidence I had worked so hard to build began to disappear. Maybe I had confused independence with safety. Until that morning, nothing serious had gone wrong, so I had mistaken good luck for preparation. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the kitchen counter and my phone lighting up just beyond my reach. By midnight, I had opened the airline website. There was a flight back to Ohio the following week. I selected a seat. I entered my name. Then I stopped at the payment screen. Leaving Ohio had felt like the first decision I had made entirely for myself in years. Now one fall was about to send me back. I stared at the button for a long time. Then someone knocked softly on my hospital room door. It was the night nurse. She carried a small plastic bag containing my phone charger, clean clothes, and a handwritten note. Your friend left this downstairs. The note was from Liza. It said, "Your table will be waiting when you are ready." I read that sentence 3 times. Emily was right. I had no emergency plan. But Liza's note reminded me that returning to America wasn't the only answer. She had noticed my empty chair within 30 minutes. My landlord had opened the apartment. 2 people who had been strangers when I arrived had stopped their lives to help me. I already had people around me. What I didn't have was a plan connecting us. The following morning, I closed the airline website without buying the ticket. When the doctor released me, Liza and my landlord were waiting downstairs. We returned to the apartment together. The wet rug was still twisted beside the shower. My coffee cup was sitting beside the sink. Everything looked exactly as it had before, but the apartment no longer felt the same. For the next several nights, I slept badly. Every sound made me nervous. Walking into the bathroom caused my chest to tighten. I called Emily and told her I wasn't coming home yet. She wasn't happy, so I asked her to give me 30 days. During those 30 days, I changed the way I lived. My landlord installed a grab bar. I replaced the loose rug with a non-slip mat and started carrying my phone from room to room instead of leaving it charging across the apartment. I gave Liza a spare key. Every morning, I messaged Emily before leaving for coffee. If nothing arrived by 9, she would contact Liza. For the first time since the fall, I felt prepared instead of merely lucky. 1 month later, I returned to my usual table at the café. Liza placed coffee, toast, and fruit in front of me. "You're late," she said. I looked at the clock. It was 8:32. 2 minutes late. We both laughed. I am still living in Dumaguete in the same apartment, and I still return to that table every morning. I no longer measure independence by how little I need other people. Sometimes it simply means knowing who will notice when your chair is empty.